guys, so I thought this month I would try and split up my book haul videos slightly differently. Today I wanted to share with you all of the books I have picked up second hand since my last book haul, as well as the books I'm currently borrowing from the library. Then hopefully later on in the month I will share with you the books that I have bought, full price or at least from bookshops or have been sent for review by the publishers. I've been toying with the best way to do my hauls lately, so do let me know what you think of this format, but without further ado I'm going to jump straight in with the books that I have picked up second hand. First up on my pile is a book that I had no idea existed before now, but sounds incredible, and that is Acorna, the Unicorn Girl by Anne McCaffrey and Margaret Ball. This I picked up in an Oxfam bookshop. Someone had donated what I assume was the whole series, but not knowing whether I was going to like book one or not, I only picked up the first one, and it is the first in a science fiction series. I know of Anne McCaffrey because she's written quite a famous dragon fantasy book series called The Dragons of Perrin, which I haven't actually read yet, but I've never heard of Margaret Ball and I hadn't heard of the series before. From what I gather, this book and presumably the preceding volumes in the series follow our protagonist Acorna, who is a young alien girl who is abandoned by her parents for the sake of her own safety. Their spaceship is attacked by more violent aliens, and they sacrifice themselves in order to take down those aliens and send off their baby in a pod in the hopes that someone will rescue her. She's then taken in by another alien race that don't recognise her species, and what makes her a unicorn girl is that she has a small horn growing from her forehead and this gorgeous silvery hair, and it's about her journey and her story, I presume. I'm just really intrigued. I love that concept of alien race of unicorn people. How does that not sound incredible? I really hope I like this one, and then maybe if I go back to that Oxfam I will pick up the other books in the series. That book was £2, but the next two mass market paperbacks I picked up were both £1 each, which is fantastic. And the first one is Dirk Gently's Holistic Detective Agency by Douglas Adams. It even says £1 right on the front here. Essentially Poundland, which is a store here in the UK. Sometimes some of them sell second-hand books, I've discovered recently, and I was in Poundland picking up some bits and pieces and came across this, which is the first in a series by Douglas Adams, author of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, which you may know is one of my favourite books and series of all time. I love that science fiction series, and this is a series that is instead set on Earth as opposed to outer space like The Hitchhiker's Guide. Follows Dirk Gently, who is a weird, wacky private investigator. They did make a television series of this on Netflix starring Elijah Wood, but set in America. But I've never actually read the book, which is kind of a shocker to me, since I have loved The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy since I was quite young. So I was really pleased when I saw this little £1 copy and thought it was my time to finally read it. Oh, and based on my knowledge of Douglas Adams, this is going to be hilarious. But then we have another, in this case 99p charity shop find, which I picked up in an Oxfam in Bradford when I was there for the Literature Festival, and that is King's Dragon by Kate Elliott, Volume 1 of Crown of Stars. This is quite obviously a cheesy fantasy book. Love covers like this, I'm instantly drawn to them. And this one was actually by an author I'd never heard of before, but it said dragon on the front, and I thought I'd just give it a chance, basically based on those two things, the cover and the fact that it said dragons. It says on the back that King Henry still holds the crown, but his reign has long been contested by his sister Sabella, and there are many eager to flock to her banner. Internal conflict weakens Windar's defences, drawing raiders, human and inhuman, across its borders. Terrifying portents abound, and a dark spirit walks the land in broad daylight. Suddenly, two innocents are thrust into the midst of the conflict. Elaine, a young man granted a vision by the Lady of Battles, and Leith, a young woman with the power to change the course of history. Both must discover the truth about themselves before they can accept their fates. For in a war where sorcery, not swords, may determine the final outcome, the price of failure may be more than their own lives. It just sounds like quintessential fantasy, and I am here for that. I then have one more second-hand book I picked up myself, and then three which were passed on to me by family and friends. And this one is Between Two Thorns, book 1 in the Split World series by Emma Newman. Again, never ever heard of this, but it was £2 in Oxfam and it just sounded like my cup of tea. It's set in 19th century England and it's about the interaction between the British court and citizens of, England, it's set in England, and the world of the Fae. Other than that, I'm purely going on the blurb, but those are things that I like in my fantasy, and if I can pick it up cheap, just on a whim, and see if it's for me, give it a chance, then I figured, why not? It also seems like there might be a romance between a male and female protagonist. It might be young adult or adult. Again, I just don't really know anything about this except for the fact that the blurb drew me in, and I think that's one of the fun things about picking up secondhand books, is just, discovering random new things. I would love to hear if you've read that book though. I then, like I mentioned, have 3 books that were passed on to me. The first 2 were passed on to me by a family friend, Linda, and the first one is The True Deceiver by Tove Jansson. Again, I don't really know anything about this book's plot, but Linda said that she loved it. It's quite dark, and I know that Tove Jansson is the author of The Moomins, although she also wrote a heck ton of adult fiction, which I had been meaning to read. I've wanted to read something by her for a while, so I figured why not just start with the one that Linda's passing on to me. I know that a lot of her books also centre on queer relationships between women, so I don't know if that is one of these, but I'm willing to find out. It says, in the deep winter snows of a Finnish hamlet, a strange young woman fakes a break-in at the house of an elderly artist in order to persuade her that she needs companionship. But what does she hope to gain by doing this, and who ultimately is deceiving whom? It's also recommended by Ali Smith. It's introduced by Ali Smith and has a recommendation by her on the back. And funnily enough, just reading that blurb, it already reminds me of multiple of Ali Smith's books, like The Seer and The Accidental, so I think that will be really intriguing. An author whose adult books I have read before though is Kazuo Ishiguro, and this is When We Were Orphans. This is another one Linda read and really enjoyed. I swapped her and gave her my copy of Never Let Me Go because that's a book that I adored. So we're both, trying different books by this author. This one, however, sounds like more of a, well, I say more of a mystery. There was mystery very much so in Never Let Me Go, but it also had a kind of dystopian science fiction edge to it, whereas I believe this one's just more like straightforward mystery. And it's about the mystery of the protagonist's parents. They went missing when he was a young boy in Shanghai, and now that he's an adult, he's learning more about what actually happened. And lastly, a book that my mum passed on to me is The Way of All Flesh by Ambrose Parry, and this is another mystery, but this one is set back in the 1800s once again, and specifically 1800s Edinburgh. My mum said she just loved this. She said it was just like a really good page turner with lots of atmosphere, and she loved the setting of Edinburgh, naturally both of us being from Edinburgh. And on top of that, she said although the main detective is a male doctor, he has like a female companion who is a housemaid but constantly proves herself to be as intelligent and as integral to solving the puzzles as the doctor, which I think sounds like a fantastic balance of things. I really enjoy a kind of Victorian era mystery novel, especially if there is strong female representation in there, and I trust my mother's recommendations. But basically, it seems like the old town of Edinburgh is host to a serial killer, and our protagonists have to find out what is going on. But then we move on to the books I currently have out of the library, of which there are 6. So first up, I have a manga, and it's actually been the longest time since I've read a manga, so I'm quite excited about this. And it is volume 1 of Orange, Story and Art by Ichigo Takano, and this is the complete collection of Orange. As you can tell, it's quite chunky, and I think there are only 2 volumes in the complete collection, so you get the entire story arc over the course of 2 volumes. Can't remember if my library had volume 2, but if not, I can maybe order it in or find a copy for myself if I naturally enjoy this. I actually saw this over on Becca's channel and she loved it. I will link her channel and her review down below so you can get a little bit of her enthusiasm for it, but she immediately convinced me I wanted to check it out, so I was really pleased when my library had a copy. I used to always borrow my manga from the library when I was in school, so this is a little bit of a nostalgic experience for me, but from what I gather about the plot, which is entirely based on Becca's review, is that it is set in a high school in Japan, and although it seems like generally like normal contemporary, our protagonist, a girl at this high school, receives a letter from her future self. So there's that little bit of, I guess, science fiction, because that reminds me of time travel, I guess, in which her future self is warning her that one of her friends is going to commit suicide, and to watch out for them, and for her and her friends to perhaps do things differently from they did the first time around. So it actually sounds like it's going to be quite hard-hitting and emotional, but like I said, Becca says it's great. I think it sounds really interesting, and I'd love to check out a little bit of manga since it's been such a long time. I did get 2 other graphic novels though. The first one is one I've been meaning to read forever, and that is Goliath by Tom Gauld. And I, again, have just heard incredible things about this. It's been on my to-read list for ages, and I think the illustrations are so cute. Really simple colour palette of brown, black and white. Quite simple line drawings, but that seem incredibly effective. This is inspired by traditional tales and is about a soldier named Goliath who isn't really interested in participating in the war but is sent off to fight, and it's his story. I don't know much else about it than that. I'm just drawn in by the illustration style and all the good things I've heard about it. And then one I know a little bit less about but I love the illustrator of, and that is Baba Yaga's Assistant, illustrated by Emily Carroll, who I've mentioned recently actually because I read one of her pamphlets, but I've also read one of her full-length graphic novels, and written by Marika Makula. So this one is a collaborative effort. I've never actually read anything that hasn't also been written by Emily Carroll when it comes to her illustration, so I'll be intrigued to see how that works out. And the illustration style actually looks quite different in this than what I'm used to, or at least the colour palette's very different because her solo work is often very dark, lots of reds and blacks and whites, whereas this is more colourful. But it does seem to use different, art, depending on, I'm assuming, whether it's within the main narrative or within stories that the characters are telling each other, I think is what's going on in these other frames. I don't really know, but it is naturally inspired by the fairy tale character Baba Yaga, and I don't know much else than that, but like I said, like Emily Carroll, so wanted to check that out. I then have 3 novels. The first one is by an author that I have read before, and that is Lanny by Max Porter. I know, I feel like I'm the last person on the planet to read this, but I did adore Max Porter's last book, Grief is a Thing with Feathers. Honestly, one of the finest pieces of literature I've ever read, and I've heard just as good things about this, although at the same time the story seems quite different. It's about a boy called Lanny and the different people in his life, his parents, his neighbour, and just their interactions with Lanny from what I gather. At the same time, it does seem to have a kind of strand of magic realism or surrealism going on there though, so I don't really know what I'm getting myself into with this book, except that Max Porter does not write like other authors. He uses a lot of interesting layouts for text and styles of prose which often come out quite lyrical in his writing, and because of that I'm just keen to read anything that he writes. We then have a book by quite a famous author who I have actually never read before, and that's The Secret Keeper by Kate Morton. Kate Morton, again, super famous. I have constantly heard her recommended for years and years, so I'm pleased to be finally giving her a shot. And I specifically picked this one up on the recommendation of a few people on Goodreads when I was asking for more books with a similar tone to The 13th Tale by Diane Setterfield, which I recently borrowed from the library and was one of the best books I've ever read. It was brilliant, loved it. And quite a few people recommended Kate Morton and specifically The Secret Keeper. It's set over 2 times. One narrative is in 1961 and the other is in 2011. In 1961, our protagonist Laurel witnesses something shocking, apparently, that changes everything. And then in 2011, Laurel is a famous actress and she is sort of exploring what happened to her when she was younger and what she saw when she was younger and piecing things together, which definitely sounds similar to The 13th Tale, so I'll be intrigued to see if I enjoy it as much. But yeah, looking forward to this one. Then lastly, we have a Japanese novel, and that is The Housekeeper and the Professor by Yoko Ogawa. I read a few Japanese novels last year that I really enjoyed, and when I was looking for more Japanese authors to check out, this one kept cropping up. A few of their novels sounded quite interesting, but this is the one that I thought I would start with. It says that he is a brilliant maths professor who lives with only 80 minutes of short-term memory. She is a sensitive and astute young housekeeper who is entrusted to take care of him. Each morning, as the professor and the housekeeper are reintroduced to one another, a strange, beautiful relationship blossoms between them. The professor may not remember what he had for breakfast, but his mind is still alive with elegant equations from the past. He devises clever maths riddles based on her shoe size or her birthday, and the numbers reveal a sheltering and poetic world to both the housekeeper and her 10-year-old son. With each new equation, the 3 lost souls forge an affection more mysterious than imaginary numbers. and a bond that runs deeper than memories. This one sounds really emotional and quite unique. I'm just keen to check this author out since I've seen so many recommendations for them when it comes to Japanese literature, and I was pleased to see my library had a copy. But those are all the second-hand books I have acquired, or books I have borrowed from the library of late. And like I mentioned, I will probably do another book haul in a few weeks in which I share with you the books I've been sent for review by publishers or I've picked up in bookshops. So if that interests you, do stay tuned and let me know what you think about me splitting up my books like this. I do really like sharing with you the books I borrow from my library now that I'm back into using my library more, because I just think it demonstrates the incredible wealth of literature stored in our libraries and hopefully encourages more of you to use your library. As well as it being a reminder that you don't need to have tons of money to make book hauls or to be part of BookTube. When it comes to the books in this video, I spent about £6, got some for free from family and friends, and then borrowed some from the library. And equally, I'm just fortunate enough at this point that I do get sent books for free by publishers as well, but even then you don't need that to be able to talk about books on the internet. Never feel like you do. I would love to hear from you though if you have read or are interested in reading any of these books, and until next time, happy reading. I'll see you all again soon. Bye guys!